True story time. I was about 4 or 5 years old, and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I liked sleeping in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer and my mom had a window open her room that was directly behind the bed above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the door frame of my mom's room. Her door was open, and you could partially see into my bedroom. It was strange, because our cat was a huge snuggler and was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and wake her up. In the 3-4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong, we both looked back up in the door frame, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window again. We were on the first floor, and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed, and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. But the strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. A terrifying but true story I experienced when I was 12. I moved to my dad's when I was 10 and didn't know anyone in the area, except for the family my dad was friends with. Single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple years older than me, 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over a couple years. We weren't close, but ended up having the same friends. One night, my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work, which is where this gets terrifying and sad. Her mother has been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was let out recently. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just their mom. She knocks a certain way when coming in and answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. Wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived and her mom's working schedule. She came in, and this is where don't know details, and I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbors to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her and left her body, naked in a bathtub, hit her head. They had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it, but they did. I wasn't allowed to go to her funeral. Happened to my wife's grandmother about 15 years ago, while we were still dating. Her husband had just passed away about a year previously, but she'd been going down to the library and volunteering exercise and socialization. This was in the winter, so her walk back was while it was getting dark. The library closed at 5, and then there was some extra stuff to do before everyone actually left, and on this particular night she turned down a ride home from another volunteer because, damn it, she needed to stay in shape. The house is about a mile away through some lightly wooded area in South Texas, and as she's about halfway home, she notices someone behind her. He's walking the same direction and gaining on her, which in itself isn't all that particular. She's old, and thus not particularly fast, but in this case he seems vaguely sinister. They keep walking. Pretty soon he's right behind her. Then he falls into pace, just staying behind her. Now she knows that something's up. But she's almost home. She can see the top of her driveway coming up, and she leaves her lights on so it'll look like someone's home when she's walking in. She just needs to make it another 150 yards, then 100 all that time. She said he was so close that she could feel his breath on her neck. Maybe 50 yards. It happened. Strong hat on her shoulder. Okay, bitch, don't turn around and hand over your purse, or I'll fucking cut ya. She stops for a second, then takes one big step forward, turns and shoots the guy in the neck with the .38 she kept in her purse. Hey, it's Texas. The guy spent the next 5 years in a prison hospital before he died of complications. My wife's grandmother passed last year up to the end. She lamented that she'd pulled the trigger too soon. My late husband would have been embarrassed to know I missed. I was sitting in my room after getting out of work on the second floor. Little bro is downstairs watching TV. The dog is in the hallway outside my door sleeping. All of a sudden, dog starts making all kinds of racket, jumping around, barking, clacking nails, howling. I go to get up to see what's up and I hear AW, that's a good girl, in a male voice. It didn't sound like little bro, so I go, oh, you're home early. Thinking it is my dad's friend, our roomie, as I open the door. Soon as I'm out there, there is no one at all, but the dog wagging her tail staring at the empty end of the hallway. Little bro comes upstairs to yell at me for getting his dog riled up, said he heard the same voice thinking it was me or our roommate. We did a once-over of the house with my butterfly knife and his BB gun, and there was nobody. Still gives me the spooks to this day. My aunt experienced something similar. She was home alone when she heard someone open the door, S&D, walking in the hallway. Since her husband, my uncle, was not supposed to get home in a few hours, she went downstairs to see if someone was there. She did not see anyone, but outside the door she saw footsteps in the snow leading to the door, but not away from it. This got her nervous, and on a second glance she saw an unfamiliar pair of shoes in the hallway. She ran up and called the police, and when they came and searched through the house, they found a homeless man hiding in a storage room, holding my uncle's shotgun, but luckily he had not found the ammunition. It was hid another place. He was arrested. But according to my aunt, it is the scariest thing she has ever experienced. Our elderly neighbor fell sick and had to go to hospital. Her niece asked us to take care of her dog while she was away. So after schoolwork and dinner and all, me and my brother were sent over to make sure he was doing okay. So it was late at night, in this weird old lady's house. My brother was in the shed with the dog, and I was in the living room, looking at the creepy old photos on the mantelpiece. What follows is true. I heard the door creak, and then a woman's voice called out the dog's name. I freaked out, turned around. Obviously there was nobody about. I thought maybe it was the neighbor's niece, but it had that weird, did I hear that outside my head or inside it? Echo to it, you know what I mean? So I also thought I was just letting the creepy house get to me. But then I went out to my brother and Naki, and he was freaking out too because he thought he'd heard a woman's voice inside the shed with him, saying, oh, there you are. We both agreed the voice had that weird in your head sound to it, and were convinced there were ghosts in the place. Left the dog in the shed, went home, and were greeted by Dad, who told us the neighbor's niece had just called to say the neighbor passed away in the hospital a few hours ago. A few years ago, I was home alone at nighttime. I was watching TV in the living room when I heard the doorbell ring. Whenever I hear the doorbell ring, especially when I'm home alone, I am cautious to answer it. I walk up to the peephole without turning on the porch light so they don't know if anyone is actually home or not, and look through. It's really dark, but I can see a small figure, more like black blob, Ike cake, its definite shape, and had to be around 3 to 4 feet, doing like a dancing motion, dipping down and oscillating its arms outward. Think of a person moving their arms like wings gracefully. It was dark outside, but this figure was more opaque, so I could see this going on. After a few seconds, I stopped looking through the peephole because it was too freaky to look at. I regained some courage and looked back through, and whatever it was gone. To this day, I still don't know what that was, and I get freaked out thinking about it. There's an abandoned house next to mine. The previous owner moved out to California 25 years prior and never sold it. I got a flashlight, gloves, and pushed the window open and went inside, starting with the basement. In the basement was a grand piano, still plays, but very much out of tune, old WW2 stuff, what seemed to be a signed Elvis poster, some other really cool shit no one should ever leave behind. There's basically a whole story in that basement, including a broken wedding picture frame and instruments everywhere. On the main floor was an unmade bed, molded food still in the fridge, and on the stovetop, half-empty beers turned solid, lights that still hadn't been turned off. Then I started walking upstairs when I heard crying from one of the side rooms. That's when I freaked the fuck out and haven't been there since. I was just talking about this today. Scary because of human nature. My neighbor at my old apartment was a state park ranger for years, now retired. Apparently when he first got the job, there was a younger kid who went missing while out on a camping or hiking trip. They organized a huge search of the area to no avail. No clues or anything. Kid is just missing. A few years go by, and some evidence turns up that wasn't in the direction they originally searched. It was part of his camping equipment. On his off time, my neighbor took to searching the area where it was found, hoping for more clues. Just outside the state park lived a couple in a ramshackle hovel who were quite reclusive and odd. One day my neighbor had to talk to them about something unrelated to the missing kid. He is in their house, which is a mess of junk, no running water, etc. Hard to focus on anything there. While he is talking to this couple, he realizes that the guy's ashtray looks weird. He looks closer and realizes that it's a skull, and it looks small. There's this investigation into the couple, and here is where things get really weird. An investigation shows that they were innocent of killing the kid. He probably died of exposure or dehydration. Apparently, this guy came across the body afterwards and his dogs were after it. When he took the skull, it was really recent after death and apparently was still head features, hair, everything. The guy took it and defleshed the damn thing and took the top off to use as an ashtray. Apparently, he was well aware there was a then-current search for missing child and could recognize the kid from the pictures, but it never dawned on him or his wife to go to the cops and inform them of the find. He just saw an opportunity for an ashtray. Apparently, he showed them where the remains were, and they scrounged together enough for burial, but kept it quiet so that the family didn't know some guy put out his Marlboros in their kid's head for 5 years after letting his dogs eat his remains. About 5 years ago, my mom started dating a guy she met on a dating site. That part is fine. I had recently started dating the woman who would later become my wife, and we had met online. I'll just refer to her as my wife for this story. Anyway, my wife and I never really liked this guy. We didn't think he was mean or anything like that. Just a little creepy. He was quiet. He kept his eyes closed a lot, and occasionally said odd things like offering my wife a chocolate and then popping one in his mouth, closing his eyes, and moaning as he let it melt in his mouth. One time, my wife and I were visiting my mom, but she got called into work, so we waited at her house. Her boyfriend was over, but he spent the entire several hours just hanging out in her bedroom with the door closed. Just before Christmas, my mom and this guy started having some difficulties. My wife and I were visiting her for the holidays, and she dropped all of her problems on us, and we listened carefully and told her our opinions and suggested that she would be better off without him. She already had her mind made up, though, and decided to break up with him. On Christmas Eve, we spent the night at my mom's and got up early on Christmas morning to visit my dad at his house. We didn't plan to spend the night at my dad's, but we got snowed in, which was actually a nice Christmas surprise. The next day we left as soon as we could get through the snow, and my wife suggested that we stop by my mom's house on the way so that we could see if she was okay. My wife just had a really bad feeling about my mom's now ex-boyfriend. My mom's car was in the driveway, but that doesn't mean much because she lives close enough to work that she often walks and it hadn't snowed in her town. She also never locks her door, which drives me crazy, so we let ourselves in. That's when we see blood oozing out of the refrigerator's water dispenser. It had filled up the spill container and was leaking onto the floor and had made a puddle. My wife screamed and I freaked out. I fully expected to see my mom's head in the freezer. I nervously opened the freezer to find a bag of frozen cherries that had been opened, crammed into the freezer so that it fell onto the ice dispenser and melted.